Okay, and so welcome to the webinar today. It is the human judgment and agency in the intelligence age. And can you guys see my screen now? I think you can. Okay, we're glad that you can be here with us this afternoon. And I'm going to go ahead and get started, but there is a short link on the screen that will give you access to the presentation. If you would like to have the presentation open in front of you, then I encourage you to click that link. That'll also allow you to save it for future use, bookmark it, or whatever you want to do. And so we'll go ahead and get started. If you don't know me already, my name is Vera Cabero, and I am the Emerging Technologies Consultant for NCDPI for a few more weeks, and then I'll be retiring. So this will be one of my last webinars with you guys. But my contact information is there. The DPI information will work until June 1st, and then it won't work anymore. So my LinkedIn is there. If anybody wants to contact me, that's a good place to reach out. I do spend a good bit of time on there, and will continue to do so. I just want to introduce this webinar by grounding us in our new statewide strategic plan, and I'm sure you've all heard about it. The Achieving Educational Excellence by 2030. Our goal is superintendent's plan is to be the best in the nation. And so he's laid out quite a few priorities for us in 8 different pillars. I've just pulled out the 2 directly related to the webinar today, which is about AI. And so strategic pillar 1 is all about student experience and preparing students for their next phase in life. And of course, most of you on this call, if you're here, you probably understand that AI is going to be a part of that next phase in their life. And it's going to be very important for our students to be not just AI literate, but AI fluent. And so these strategic priorities challenge us to continue working on personalizing instruction, and also continuing to guide the responsible use of artificial intelligence. And then the second one over here challenges to embed or establish scalable approaches to embed artificial intelligence safely, responsibly, and ethically to ensure collaborative problem solving is included in the learning experience. And so those are very lofty goals, but very important goals if we're going to truly prepare our students for the world they're moving into. And so I'd just like to kind of ground what we're doing there. I also like to give you access to a companion document. Now, unlike most companion documents that I create just for the webinar, this one is going to actually link you back to our statewide AI guidelines, because this webinar is based on a framework that we have added to Appendix F of our statewide guidelines. And so the Human Judgment and Agency and Durable Skills Framework, you'll find by clicking the link here, or going to our statewide guidelines and going to Appendix F. And we'll look at that more in depth as we go through the webinar today. So I'm not going to dive into it much today. That's just a picture of it. Okay, so as we talk about human judgment and agency today in the intelligence age, I just want to point out that this is aligned with the portrait of the graduate and the durable skills, the 7 durable skills of the portrait of the graduate. And if you've heard me speak before, you know that I normally align things to the portrait of the graduate, because those durable skills of the portrait of the graduate really were very forward, and they are aligned very closely with what all of the companies and employers out there always say when they're asking surveys what they're looking for in their employees. And so those 7 durable skills are extremely important. And I feel like if our students can graduate really mastering those seven durable skills and AI fluency, then they're going to be in a much better place to compete for the jobs of the future. And even though we don't know what that's going to look like yet, we know that AI is going to have a big impact on it, is already starting to impact it in ways. And the best way we can prepare our students is to give them those skills of adaptability, critical thinking, collaboration, empathy, learner's mindset, personal responsibility, that make up our durable skills of the portrait of the graduate. So I just want to kind of start off with talking about how things have changed. And if you're in education, this is probably not a newsflash to you, but AI has really challenged our educators, and it's actually challenged our whole education system. And so, but I really feel like the problem is not the tool. It's not the AI is here. That's the problem. The task design is becoming the problem. And so if we are designing these traditional linear tasks of the past in an AI enabled world, those tasks are not going to work as expected anymore, because students have access to these powerful tools. And even if we try blocking and banning and go back to pencil and paper, they're still going to have access outside of school if they don't have it inside of school. And that also introduces a real equity gap and some disparities, because some students are going to have more access than other students. Our public schools are our last hope and our best hope for making sure that every student has equitable access to these tools of the future. And so if we just keep assigning the multiple choice questions with one right answer, short answers with one right answer, the formulaic 5-paragraph essay, the read the questions read the text and then answer questions at the end of the book, those tasks can all be completed in a matter of seconds by any AI tool and by any person without any specialized skill. Even a weak prompter can put in an essay prompt and have the chatbot create an acceptable, probably not an A essay, but probably a good solid B essay in a matter of seconds. And so we have to start thinking about those tasks and how do we redesign those tasks to make sure that we are, first of all, ensuring academic integrity. And I hear a lot of concern about academic integrity. And I really feel like that task redesign is the only way to ensure academic integrity, because in today's world, with the tools that students have available to them, if you're only grading the product, and it is one of these types of products that AI can do very, very quickly, then we're not going to be able to ever tell whether the student did it or not. And so we have to think about how to redesign those. And we're redesigning for a world where we're expecting 170 million new roles are going to emerge in the next 5 years or 4 years now. That's a 2030 prediction. And 40% of those core workforce goals are going to change. And that comes from the World Economic Forum's 2026 report. And so how do we fix that? We have to look at instructional design as a solution. So it's not a failure of a teacher, and I don't want to feel like we're beating up on teachers, because it's not a failure. Things are just different. It's not the teaching that you have to do in light of the AI revolution is going to be different than what we learned in our teacher prep classes. And so we're going to have to also practice those durable skills of adaptability and learning to learn and relearn that are going to be so important to our students. And so that's kind of what this webinar is about. And when we talk about redesigning task and assuming AI use, because you can't guarantee that there will not be AI use, then we want to make sure that we are protecting the irreplaceable core, which is the human thinking and judgment and ethical decision making and personal responsibility. We want to make sure those things are primary, and that's difficult in an AI world. But if we're doing that, then we're going to be truly evaluating the thinking that our students are doing. And again, I'm tying it to those 7 durable skills of the Portrait of the Graduate, and we'll dig into those more deeply as we go through the webinar today. But I'm going to go ahead and move along. We're going to do an activity first of all, and this is a small enough group where we can just do this in the chat if that's your preference, or we can unmute if you want to unmute. But I just want you to think for a minute about an assignment or a task in your classroom, or if you're not a teacher, it can be a classroom that you work with, and think about that task, and that find a task in your classroom that AI could currently do with little to no student thinking. And you either drop it in the chat, or you can open turn on your mic and just speak it, whichever one you want. And my chat is not, there it is. Okay. I'm going to give just a little bit of think time, but feel free to unmute if you have something to offer. And I'm watching the chat now. Okay, write sentences for academic vocabulary words. Absolutely. I was an English teacher and a social studies teacher, so I had my students do that often. That was an assignment. We were learning new vocabulary. They would have to write sentences using the vocabulary words. They could just plug those words in now and have that spit out in a few seconds. Ashley says, creating a practice set for a standard taught but not mastered. Yeah, creating a practice set would be very easy to do. I can give AI any standard and say, create a practice set of problems for that. Have it in a few seconds. Book reports, definitely. You could have an AI create a report very quickly. Just give it the teacher's directions and it would follow those directions. Solving multi-step equations. Yes. A few years ago, math was kind of protected from this AI revolution because it couldn't do math well. Now it's solved math problems that human mathematicians haven't been able to solve. Their AI tools. So the math has definitely improved with AI research papers. Certainly, you can use something like a deep research and get those research papers in any format you want with citations, any kind of citations you want. Labeling cell parts on a diagram, yes. Identifying character traits for a character, especially of a classic text, definitely. Anything at the lower level of blooms, certainly. Okay, so anything at that lower level of blooms, pretty much AI can handle, and some things at the upper end as well. So we really have to think about how we're going to change that. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And if you think about all of those tasks, what was the original cognitive goal of that assignment? 20 years ago, if I asked students to label the parts of a cell, the cognitive goal would be what? Stacy, I think that was yours. Do you want to come off mute and share that?
Well, yeah. So in seventh grade science, you would be wanting to make sure that the kids could, simply identify the parts. There's a standard specifically about structure, structure and function, but it doesn't stop there, right? And so I feel like the change is if AI can do it by just, we could always Google the cell diagram, right? But now AI just takes it to the next level.
Okay, absolutely. And if you think about all these other tasks we have here, like the cognitive goal of the assignment, writing sentences for academic words, if the cognitive goal there is to kind of help internalize those definitions, if we're having AI do it, that internalization is not happening. That thinking process is not happening. And we could say the same for any one of those things that were listed there. And that's one of the big concerns that people have about AI is it will replace thinking and it will weaken our students' thinking skills. And it absolutely will if that's the only way they're using it. And so one of our big tasks, I feel like as educators, is to try to show them another way of using it and try to force them to use it in a way that does force that human thinking and human judgment. And that's kind of what this framework is about. It's something I've been pondering on for a couple of years now. And we're going to get into it a little more, but in order to adjust your assignments and redesign your instruction to require human thought and human judgment, you don't necessarily have to be an AI expert. And so a lot of people feel like because I'm not an expert on AI, that I can't do this. But there are tools to help you. And we're going to show you a tool today that we've created to help you. And so anybody can really do this. As a teacher, a former teacher myself, I know that teachers are probably some of the biggest perfectionists on the planet, and we are very hard on ourselves sometimes. And so it's very hard to stand up in front of a class and not know more than they know about a thing. And so a lot of people avoid some of this advanced technology for that reason. There are a lot of other reasons as well. But in this kind of situation, you don't have to be an expert. The role is not to police the tool. If we're putting that in our job description, we're really setting ourselves up. If we're going to say, okay, all teachers, your job is to police and make sure students don't use AI, you're setting yourself up for failure because of the situation we're in today. It's just not something you can prevent or something you can detect with fairness and accuracy. And we have recommended from the start in our AI guidelines against the use of AI detectors for that reason, because quite often students are accused who don't use AI, and many students who use AI fly under the radar, don't get caught. And so that's just not a tenable situation. And so our role is to require justification, defense, and student judgment in our assignments. And you can do that while teaching your content, while teaching your standards. And so before assigning any task, if we kind of look at it through these three critical checkpoints, is where does the judgment live? Is this assignment requiring students to make any judgments? What decisions do they have to make? And how will you see their thinking? This idea of visible thinking is crucial. And we talk a lot about process over product. If we're only grading that end result, we're not seeing that thinking. And so that's why I'm a big proponent also of learning portfolios, because you need to capture that whole beautiful learning process. And it needs to be evaluated on the whole process, not just that product. Somebody says someone needs to help the colleges to understand our guidance on AI detectors. And you're absolutely right, Leah. Or is it Lee? Probably Lee. But I have heard lots of kind of horror stories about colleges still using AI detectors right here in North Carolina. And I have connected with some people in both the community college and the university level system, and trying to make sure that they are aware of that. But I feel like our K-12 schools are actually moving a little more rapidly than our colleges are, and we need to work on that alignment for sure. And so that's something the people that follow me will have to continue working on, because that alignment is messed up. It's missing. So we'll kind of keep going. The blueprint for redesign, every modern assignment has got to leverage the strengths of the machine, the AI, and the human if you're really going to achieve that durable skills mastery. So that synergy between the person and the AI tool is something I talk about a lot in teacher development as well. But our student assignments also need to reflect that same synergy. And so the AI can do some of the groundwork. It can augment things like generating lots of options, generating example assignments, exemplars, things like that. So it can generate simulations and scenarios now. Every one of the AI tools can generate actual live simulations now. Drafting and translation, rapid prototyping, all of those things are things that AI can be good at, is really good at, and can save humans time. But then the humans need to make sure that their time is spent on the important parts, which is the judgment, like validating and verifying the content, making sure that the human empathy is there, that it's ethical decision making is taking place in what you do with the AI tools and what the output is. And then the pivots and adaptations. And so instead of just taking what you get, you need to make sure that you pivot and that the students are able to pivot and adapt what they get from the AI tool. And then defending and justification. Those are super important. And that's kind of what this framework and this gem that we're going to look at today is about. Okay, so I have a few sample assignments in here that are in our guidelines, and I just want to kind of talk through them. And notice that each one of them is anchored on one of the 7 durable skills of the Portrait of the Graduate, although they really apply to multiple of those skills. But just kind of looking at that relationship to the Portrait of the Graduate. For adaptability, which I feel like really is probably going to be one of the most crucial skills, because our students are going to have to learn and relearn constantly. In our parents' generation, most people had a job for 30 years and they never changed jobs. In our generation, people are changing jobs probably 3 or 4 times in a lifetime. This next generation, they're going to be changing jobs a whole lot more frequently, and the skills they do on the jobs are changing a lot more frequently. And so it's really important that they're able to adapt, and that's something that doesn't come naturally. Students they're not naturally good at having to adapt. And so this is a grade 8 math standard, standard 8F4, which is about linear equations. So instead of just giving students a bunch of problems and saying find a linear equation, students can use AI to generate linear models for real world scenarios. So I feel like anytime we can attach it to a real world scenario, the learning is much more authentic and real. And then they have to test edge cases like extremely large values and pivot when the math fails reality, justifying their revisions. And so that's a way that you can pull that human judgment piece into a math assignment instead of just having them do, the problems in the book or the problems on the worksheet. And so having them test those edge cases and try different things out. For a grade 7 science assignment, developing a plant growth hypothesis, the AI can generate alternative hypotheses, but the students then would need to test them, analyze the gap and the expected results, and then adapt their procedures. And so both of those assume AI use. And so it could be that the teacher generates those hypotheses if the students are not allowed to use the AI tools, or the student does if they're at an age where they're allowed to. But either one of them pulls in that human judgment and that thinking. And so the visible thinking that's required is annotating the models, showing mathematical failure points, and then documenting procedure changes. And so I'm just going to pause for a minute and see if anyone on the call has anything they want to add or push back or discuss about either one of those before we move on to the next one. Any comments or questions or clarifications on that one? We'll move on to the next one if not. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next one then. And again, they're anchored on these Portrait of the Graduate Durable Skills. So this one's focusing on collaboration. And so going from task division to collective sense making. And so in previous group work scenarios, in most of the school situations I've been in, you take one task and you divide it up into pieces, and each person does one piece of that task. But in doing so, they're only getting one part of the skill set. And so instead of doing that, looking at it as more of a collective sense-making activity kind of ensures, first of all, that everybody masters all of the skills and that everybody's doing a task that's related to the actual standard or skill at hand. But ensuring this collective sense-making helps also with that, ensuring that human judgment. And so an example from a grade 10, a CTE or a STEM assignment might be generating individual AI solutions for a community infrastructure challenge like flooding mitigation. It's very primary in the area I live in. And then they have to negotiate competing priorities like cost versus function. Also, they could negotiate priorities for different different people in the community, like people that live on the riverbank, people who make money on tourism, so forth. So that there are a lot of different ways besides just cost and function. But then they have to synthesize one final unified design. And so again, the AI is augmenting it. And that could be done by a teacher or a student, but the student has to pull in that human judgment piece to negotiate the priorities and rank them and make a final unified decision that kind of pulls it all together. A grade 12 civics assignment, groups use AI to generate the strongest possible counter arguments to their own debate position. And this is something I used to have students do whenever I had students debate in social studies class. And it's very, very difficult for a student to kind of see the other side of an issue. It's a very good skill, but AI is great at helping them with that too, because I feel like debate is a really useful and underused skill in our education system, learning how to speak and learning how to speak civilly and defend your position civilly. And so this is a great way to use AI, to kind of have it generate those counterpoints. And then the team could collaboratively decide which points to concede and which to defend. And then they could even have to debate the opposite point of view or something like that. So there's a lot of different ways to tackle that. But the visible thinking required would be trade-off matrices where they have to put this into writing. They have to draw a chart or a table or something that shows the points that they conceded and which ones they defended and why. And then consensus decision logs detailing the conflict resolution process, things like that. And again, I'm going to pause after each one of these just because I want to give you opportunity if anybody wants to say anything, add to it. If you've got another idea of how this might apply in your role. I'm happy to hear that as well, but I want to pause and give time for that. And I'm looking at Stacy's comment, one of the people that writes and posts about AI in education. Stefan Bochard has taught with debate for years. Yes, Stefan's a great one to follow. And he does do a lot to promote debate, and it is a great skill. If a person can stand up and defend their position orally, then they understand, they know their context. And so I think that oral defense is a great skill to bring back to the classroom. Also, talking about how to make sure students are really learning. If they turn in a beautiful project, you never know if AI did it or not, but if they have to, even if it's just a quick conversation between the teacher and the student, and explain their process and what they learned and what their challenges were, then you can be assured that they actually did the work and that they actually understand it. And so oral defense debate of any kind, I think, is a great skill to bring back.
One of the other things and I know we both follow him a lot, Vera, is that he's been teaching with debate for, way before the age of AI struck. And we know, debate as a method and a club and everything have been around for decades, right? But what I really love about the way he posts about it is he's using it for, real students right now. And also that it brings in all of those other durable skills that we talk about that are the kind of the centerpiece of what we want kids to understand, and they learn the content, whatever, as long as it's real standards aligned. And then last, it takes advantage of your face-to-face time, right? You're in person, bring the kids to a building, to your classroom, and gets them to work together. So it really maximizes so many things at once. So I really enjoy reading what he writes, how his
Yeah, I do too. It's very insightful. Very good one to follow if you haven't. And I saw Chelsea posted in the comments that her children are 19 and 21. She worries that they're in that gap and won't ever develop those skills of oral defense and debate. And that is a tough place to be. And when they're 19 and 21, you can't make them do anything. And so hopefully they will, and you can encourage them to do something to encourage them to learn those speaking skills, take public speaking, attend TED Talks, things like that. Can help with that, but nothing takes the place of actually having those opportunities provided for you in a classroom. And I worry that in the future, we're going to see a gap in students that have had those opportunities and students that haven't, just like we're going to see the AI opportunities, the gap in the students have had AI opportunities or not. And yeah, social media is their classroom for debating, and it's not very effective debating. And the adult role models on there are not doing it very well either. And so that's a really unfortunate situation. Social media has taken a toll there for sure. Okay, well, I'm going to move along. Love seeing the comments. If anybody has anything else, feel free to drop those in. But we're going to look at communication next, from polished products to explanation and defense. So kind of continuing that same vein about defending and debating. I think that's a similar thread that you're going to see through a lot of these assignments. A grade 9 ELA standard, for example, AI drafts the exact same argument for 3 different audiences. That's one of the standards about being able to write for a particular audience. And so if you have AI drafts for the 3 audience, and the students have to choose the most effective version, analyze the rhetorical shifts, and then orally defend their strategic choice. Another one for business, AI generates workplace email responses with varying tones, talking about aggressive, passive, so forth. And they have to analyze the professional impact of each and revise the chosen version for maximum clarity. Now, again, either one of these could be done whether the students are using the AI or the teacher is, depending on the classroom situation. The teacher could have the AI draft these things as well. But the important part is that the students are doing the thinking, they're making the judgment calls, they're making decisions, they're defending, and they're evaluating. All of those things are what's the most important. And the visible thinking that's required, audience analysis charts, oral defense transcripts, tone impact matrices. These are things that you could require of your students to do. And I'll go ahead and move to the next one. Sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay, the next one is critical thinking. Sorry, pause there for a second. Going from recall to evaluation and justification. And so examples here from social studies and science, a grade 8 social studies assignment. You could use AI to generate 3 different historical interpretations of the American Revolution. It could be economic, ideological, or social, or it could be from different perspectives. You could have it from the American perspective, the British perspective, the Native American perspective. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at that. But students then could evaluate each against primary sources, reject the weakest with evidence, and defend the strongest. And so primary sources are still a great resource in the social studies classroom and the language arts classroom as well. But just because we're using AI doesn't mean that we're going to stop referring to those primary sources. Those can be used for evaluation, teaching them that critical evaluation piece when they're evaluating AI outputs. And so the grade 10 science assignment could be really any standard of having them compare an AI summary of a complex study to the original research article, and then identifying anything that was omitted, like nuances, assessing the potential misinterpretations and revising it for scientific accuracy. Because if you've ever had this done, a lot of times the research or the summary will be lacking in ways, and using that human oversight to kind of review it and see what is missing and what kind of maybe misinterpretations there were, or what kind of other interpretations could have been, is a great way of ensuring that thinking. And so visible thinking, again, evidence evaluation matrices, source credibility analysis, and the original versus AI comparison charts. And so any thoughts on that one before I move to the next one?
So Vera, I'm going to chime in here again too, because one of the things that like the one for grade 10 science makes me think of is a school AI space that I created for one of our middle school teachers, and it was under the umbrella of a hallucination detective. Like that was kind of the intent behind it, but it could be adjusted for this kind of situation too, where you have AI generate, whatever it is that you want them to do, want them to look at, they read it, and then they could work with a partner and identify, the misconceptions or the omitted, whatever's omitted, and have it be really aligned to whatever standard you're teaching. And it could be a face-to-face thing where they work with a partner, and then the third thing in the group is their school AI chatbot or something, some education safe AI for them.
Yeah, so that is a great way if you're in one of the situations where your students are not allowed to interact with AI. We don't recommend it at all for elementary, but something like a magic school or a school AI that allows you to create those experiences could be a safer way of doing it as well. What are some strategies for priming our 3rd to 5th graders to be prepared for this level of evaluation? And that's a great idea. Our elementary school students can do these kinds of things. And again, it would be teacher created, but you could do the same thing, of course, on, an age appropriate level of difficulty, but they could read a primary source or refer to a primary source about something in their curriculum. Like North Carolina, the 4th grade curriculum is very North Carolina centric, and they don't use a lot of primary sources generally in elementary, and some of them may be too difficult. But I think you could do some of the same kind of things, but also just as a media literacy component, having them look at a set of images in which one of them may be AI generated and the others are real, and have them try to determine which one it is. A lot of times it's very, very difficult to do. And then that would help them kind of also to realize how AI can create these things. And it's something as our elementary kids need to know, is that everything they see is not real. And that's something I really think we should be teaching in very early ages, giving them that media literacy piece. And I'm sure there are many other ideas for that also. If anybody else has one they want to chime in, you're welcome to. But I think it is important that we're doing similar activities with our elementary age students, just not with them interacting with the AI. But the teacher could create this content and still have the students analyze it without the students going on and creating the content themselves, but pared down for elementary standards and elementary abilities, obviously. So I'm going to move on to the next one, empathy and mindset. These are kind of joined together on one slide, but building that empathy piece is becomes super important. We got a little pushback when we were creating our portrait of the graduate skills for including that one, but it's become actually one of the more prominent skills that our companies and business leaders are asking for in their employees, is the ability to have empathy and kind of interact with other humans. And so students could use an AI chatbot persona of a literary antagonist from a book, interview the character to analyze their motivation versus justification, reflect on the perspective taking, how perspective taken deepens their understanding of the text. Then the learner's mindset, building that ability to just continue learning and wanting to learn. They could translate a passage, this is for foreign language, and compare it directly to the AI's translation. And they would then need to analyze it for missed cultural nuances, research idioms, document what the gap teaches them about language and structure. Now, the AI tools are very, very good at translation now, but there are still some nuances and things sometimes that a native speaker will pick up on. And so that is a good skill for someone who is a language learner as well. And Stacy says there's some great lessons that relate to understanding AI that are geared to elementary students. One centered around the Teachable Machine site. Yeah, that's a great site. Helps them learn machine learning, train the AI and evaluate it and how it responds. The dayofai.org website also has some elementary age appropriate things, as does code.org if you're looking for elementary content. There's some content on both of those sites as well. So for this one, the visible thinking is empathy, reflection, nuance gap analysis, insider, outsider perspective comparisons. So again, evaluating that thinking, not just the end result. Okay, and personal responsibility, I'm going to move a little more quickly so we get time to get into the gym and use it. But these are a couple examples from high school, grade 11 digital media. Before publishing an AI generated awareness campaign, students would use AI to surface potential risk like bias and misrepresentation, which of course is a great idea anyway before you publish anything, and then decide acceptable risk levels and write a formal responsibility statement. Grade 9 health, AI could generate an optimal diet plan, and then they have to critique it for safety concerns like allergies, eating disorders, modify it to prevent harm, and explain their ethical obligation to verify health advice. And the visible thinking could be risk identification matrices for this one, responsibility statements, safety concerns checklists, those kinds of things. And I'm going to move on to the next part because we have about 20 minutes left before we need to get to the closing. And so I want to do some hands-on work now and ask you to engage a little bit with us hands-on. And so one is to just, we won't have you actually pull this up and review it, but thinking about a traditional assignment such as write a 5-paragraph essay on the causes of World War I, which I have had my students do in the past, with a partner. If we were in a classroom setting, we would do the partner. This time we'll just kind of let you share out, but apply these critical questions and think about rebuilding it. And so if we think about an assignment like that, like write an essay on the causes or the effects of World War II, say, where does the judgment currently live in that situation? If I give that to a student, right now AI could do it all. So it's not really requiring any student judgment that can be forced and that we can be guaranteed that the student judgment is taking place. What decision could we force the student to make instead? So if you think about that, writing an essay on the effects of World War II, for example, how could we make sure that students are actually thinking in an assignment like that? Does anybody have any ideas they want to come off mute and share or put in the chat?
Well, you could have the AI create the essay and then have the student rank the causes from what they felt was the biggest cause to the least, and have them justify why they put them where they did, and have them do it on paper or have a matrix C or whatever that they could share with somebody else.
Yep, that's excellent. Great idea. Yep. I like that one. Anyone else have any?
I love that idea, Shannon. It makes me think of having the AI, like different groups of students kind of taking a point of view or taking and giving the AI its expert role, like act like an expert in, from whatever point of view on the topic World War I or whatever it is, and then comparing the outputs based on where the AI centered its expertise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if we think about that example that Shannon gave, what artifact what would be the visible thinking? What would you collect to show that students were thinking? And I think she already answered that for us, have them put it on paper, their justification. And so that's the kind of thing that we need to be thinking about, is how do we rework the current assignments? It doesn't mean we have to throw everything out, but how can we rework an assignment so that we are ensuring that students are actually doing some thinking and applying the human judgment. Another idea, and I've used this before for this same assignment, is instead of just having them write an essay on the causes of the revolution or of the World War II, you could have them say, how would your life today be different if the Axis powers had won World War II? And that makes them analyze. First of all, if they didn't know what the Axis powers were, they might use AI to find that out, and they might find out about what the effects of the revolution or the war were. But that makes them kind of apply it to their own life. And you could further require them to have like 3 examples from their own life where things would be different today if the Axis powers had won, or could potentially be different. And so that extending their thinking beyond just the factual recall, the AI-able or Googleable answers. Meredith, you have one?
No, I'm sorry. I had to take a call and I'm just coming back in and
Okay.
re-engaging. And I just wanted you to see my face so you know I was engaged. Sorry, I
Okay.
didn't mean to distract.
Oh, no problem. I thought you might be chiming in. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move along. And I want to also just point out, I showed you the companion document earlier, but all of those assignments from this presentation were abbreviated. If you want to see more detailed versions of those assignments, you can refer to that companion document, and it will show you kind of a little more detail on each one of those. But so what we've done is created a gem, which if you're not familiar with Gemini gems, they're basically a custom chatbot. This is Gemini's version of a GPT. And this gem is trained on this framework and the 7 durable skills, North Carolina centric, the North Carolina AI guidelines, the North Carolina AI literacy timeline. And so it will allow you to upload an existing lesson that you already created, or just provide a grade and the standard, the subject, and the location. And then this gem will create an assignment or an assessment, an activity that teaches that skill that you've outlined, but does it in a way that forces the students to use their human judgment and agency. And this is a good way for people to kind of help wrap their minds around what this might look like in their own context. I tried to use a variety of different grade levels and subject matters from grade 6 to 12 with more focus on AI use. So I didn't use a lot of elementary, but if you are an elementary school teacher, you could still use this gem, and it should apply your standard, whatever your standard is, in a way that gives you an idea of how to do this with your students. And it should not recommend that they use AI tools because it is trained on our timeline. If it does, of course, that's the human oversight piece. You need to watch and verify it. But I'm just going to kind of open it up, and I encourage you to do the same. I see Stacy has dropped the link in the chat. And if you open this gem, it's going to open up and look like you're in Gemini. And if you don't have access to Google Gemini on your school account, unfortunately, it will not allow you to use a gem. And so hopefully everybody does have access to Gemini. But when it opens up, as you can see, I've already used it a few times. So your previous uses will be saved there. If you use it today, you want to come back and use it later. And I do have a slide for this, but I am going to show you that you can pin it. You'll see the gems that you've used. After you've used it, it'll show up over here. You won't see it yet, but after you close it, and whenever you see it, you can actually pin it and it will stay there so you can go back to it. And then when you open it, your previous uses will show here as well. And so, but first of all, notice that whenever it opens, it asks you some questions. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see that a little better. It says, how can you teach when answers are free and easily accessible? And it invites you to upload your current assignment or provide a grade, subject, standard, or learning objective and location, a city and state. And that's not absolutely necessary, but I do feel like the most relevant you can make things to your students, the more the learning is going to stick, helping relate. And AI is excellent at that, synthesizing and finding a way to pull any standard into your local area. So I do recommend that. And so I'm going to go that route instead of uploading an assignment. And I'm going to just put here 8th grade social studies. And I'm going to grab a standard from my 8th grade social studies and just copy the whole standard in, which is what I recommend as opposed to just giving it a number reference. You want to make sure that it is getting the full standard. And so I'm going to go find one of my 8th grade social studies standards. I'm going to do 8B12, and I'm going to paste it in. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me see if I can minimize that a little bit so we don't go off the screen. And then I am going to say my students, I always do Rosman, North Carolina. That's where I went to school. And it's the littlest one, like, barely on the map town. And it's always impressive how it can really pull that local context in. And so I could also give it anything else I wanted. I could give it more context about my students. Like I could say things like a mixed ability group, high ELL population, anything like that I want to say, I can add to it to help it further target. And if you've heard me speak or any of us speak before, you know that the more context you give it, the better your outcome is going to be. But then I'm going to go ahead and just press enter. I'm just going to do the fast model because of people watching right now, but you can switch that to a thinking model and you might get more detailed results. It usually does pretty well with the fast one though. And so it's going in, it's analyzing my content, my grade level, my subject, my standard, and location. And I've set these up to co-create with the teacher because I don't want to just have them push a button and spit out a lesson and take that. We want to make sure that the teachers are also using their human judgment and agency. And so when I create these gems, rather than just having them an input-output machine, I like to set them up that require the teacher to participate in it and evaluate the output. And so it's going to co-create with you. And so as an educator in Rosman, you're working on within the AI literacy stage of the timeline. So it's referencing our timeline. And notice that it will show you where it got that. This is all the resources that I gave it. And it will let you pull open that document if you want and kind of see where that came from by looking at the sources. And so here's a proposed redesign for the social studies, tailored for a mixed ability high ELL classroom. The task, uncovering the unseen narratives of the land. They read a textbook chapter about the interaction between Cherokee groups and European settlers and answer 5 comprehension questions. That is the original task, the linear task, the task that is broken by AI. That's just not something that we can be asking our students to do in today's day and time. And so instead, a suggested redesign test is AI generated narratives. The inquiry, students use AI to generate 3 short historical snapshots of how cultural values influence the development of the French Broad River Valley, which is right in Rosman. And then the ELL support, it gives me ideas to use AI to generate the snapshots at 3 different reading levels to ensure they can all access core content. And then the prompt, generate a 200-word story about the cultural interaction between Cherokee people and the early settlers. So it even gives you a prompt that you can use to generate the story. And then the phase 2, the admission investigation, human judgment aligned with critical thinking and communication, durable skills. They have to act as historical detectives. And again, it shows you where the resource where it's referring to. And students compare the snapshots to primary sources or local historical archives. They have to identify, so it shows you in everyone a decision point. This is where the thinking is. How will you know they're thinking? They have to identify one group or cultural practice that AI missed or oversimplified. And then such as the specific role of Cherokee women in society or the influence of the Scotch Irish, something that it missed. And as an ELL strategy, use a comparison matrix with visual icons to help students track differences between AI output and historical evidence. I think that would be good for all the students in the room, not just the ELL, but a good strategy. And then the third phase, the responsibility revision, they take ownership of the narrative by correcting the AI. And so they rewrite the snapshot to include the missing perspective. The final product is a fact check local history post that has the original AI draft, their revision, and then a responsibility statement explaining how they use their human agency to revise it. And so then it shows you the alignment to the portrait of the graduate. And then it asks, does this feel manageable for your ELL population? Or would you like to adjust it to be more visual, creating a dual perspective storyboard? And you can continue to engage with it to edit this any way that you want to do it. But I feel like it does a pretty good job, and you have all of the agency yourself to edit it and engage with it as much as you want to. But I want to just give a couple of minutes without me talking for you to engage with it yourself, and then hopefully we'll have some people who will want to share something that they've created with it. If anybody has an assignment handy and wants to try the upload feature and have it just revise a current assignment, that's also a good way of doing it. And so about 2 minutes, and then we'll come back and see if anybody has anything to share.
So Vera, keeping in my theme of cells, right? I went over to the gem, and my prompt was to paste in the standard. So it was LS.7.1.3, use models to explain the hierarchical organization of multicellular organizations, and it continues. But I also added that my students are middle school students, just in case it didn't know based on the standard. I thought I'd just reinforce that. In Catawba County, they're the Pirates is their mascot, and they're interested in sports, farming, and the school has many cultural interests. So I put all that in, and so it welcomes me. It's a very friendly gem, and it references the AI guidelines and restates the standard, and says it's going to give us a choice of being the Catawba bioengineers, and it's kind of a traditional start where kids come up with analogies, but they have to localize it and humanize it so that it reflects Catawba County. So I think adding the local context, really will, make it, you might not realize the different ways that it can integrate the local information as a teacher until you kind of throw it into AI and see what it comes up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a powerful addition personally. I know students will just check, they will just be more tuned in if it applies to something that they know that's in their world. And so I do that routinely with the ones that I'm creating, all the gems that I'm creating. And I did go back to mine. I didn't really like that it lowers the lexile level. And so I went back and asked it to make some revisions to keep it all on grade level. And you'll see that it does kind of, first of all, it analyzes me, my user intent, and then it creates a new plan. And so it kind of comes up with ways. I ask it to do to add some scaffolding, such as defining terms in context and using more visual support rather than lowering the lexile level. And so it redoes it. So it is very, not on the word I'm looking at, very adaptable. You can change it. You can adapt anything that it creates. And that's the important part that we really need to be driving home to our teachers, that they need to be the human oversight also, and making sure it does apply to their way of teaching, their community, make sure that it really reflects their standard and all of that. So it recreated it for me and changed it so that the terms are defined in context instead of just dumbing it down. I don't really like that. I don't like that approach. And so it changes that for me. And then the rest of it stays pretty similar, but you can make any change to it that you want to when it creates it. And then if you want to export it, Well, it also always wants to be helpful and ask you, what else do you want it to create? So you could say, okay, now create me a rubric to evaluate this, create fact cards, create an exit ticket. You can have it continue to create. But if you want to export it, you should be able to just export it to Google Docs, unless that's something that's been blocked on your domain, and it will just put it down here. And then whenever it's ready, you open it as a Google Doc. So it makes it very easy if you're a Google user to export these as a Google Doc and kind of save them so that you have them access. And then of course here it's fully editable, but you could do lots of other things too. When it's finished, you could ask it to create a slideshow introducing this assignment to students, a 10 slide deck show. What do you want on each slide? You could continue to create and engage with it, but you can also just copy the response, of course. And if you go ahead.
I just want to jump in real quick and say, and just ask if anybody else has played with it, and if it came back with this thing called the boss of the bot talk and a little protocol that you could use. It gave me a little script to explain it to my 7th graders. Is that something that you have kind of designed behind the scenes? Because I love this idea. It explains how to explain how AI is like a smart visitor from another planet. So, and I love the phrase boss of the bot.
I don't think I told it to do that.
Well, it did a great job of it. So
I don't think I can take credit for that one. Sorry, I think that's Gemini. But I do see a comment from Chesley that I love. I love this. The suggestion for 3rd graders from Winston-Salem was to have them act as history detectives by reading 3 AI-generated letters generated from different perspectives and include a hallucination in each letter. Students will use maps, absolute relative location, and climate data of Winston-Salem to find the hallucination and each explain what was wrong. That's an excellent way to teach AI literacy also in an elementary classroom. I love that one, Chesley. And yeah, go ahead.
I chose a Math 1 standard. I'm in rural North Carolina, Rutherford County, and I chose a interpret functions, and it's the redesign task is a data detective, interpret key functions, and then instead of a generic textbook, students choose a quantity of interest relevant to life in rural North Carolina, seasonal temperature shifts, poultry production trends over time, growth of a small business. And students will use AI to create realistic data sets representing the monthly revenue of a small rural hardware in Rutherford County over 2 years, including seasonal peaks and a period of decline during a local road construction project. Students ask the AI to identify the intercepts, maximums, and intervals of increase and decrease for the generated data.
Okay.
And it did some.
As a math teacher, do you think it's solid?
I do. I think and then there's a part about a detailed task where but I know where the teacher's going to come back at me at here is, I scroll down because it said, ask the AI to identify the intercepts, maximums, and stuff. Teachers want the kids to do that, and this is an EOC tested subject. Yeah. So what is a good argument right back there?
Well, I would just add that to the next chat bot and say, I don't want the AI to create these. This is something that our students need to be doing, and just have it revise it. Because you don't want them to, that's a skill that they need to learn, and it should be able to redo it and apply that. Okay. But I do like that, applying that math to the real world context. The students are not going to pay attention to Sally has 12 oranges and Susie has 14, that put in that real world context to it really makes it more applicable to their real lives. And so I love that one too. Anybody else want to come off mute and share?
I was just going to add on to what you just said, Vera, about, well, I would just tell the chatbot that's not what you want it to do. And I think that just to reinforce, just because an AI tool, a GEM, a GPT, whatever it is that you're working with tells you a certain thing, you are in charge of that output. And if you don't like what it says, you don't have to do that. So you can, like Vera was showing you, you can fully edit, you can fully customize, and you can have that conversation back and forth until you get the output where you want it to be. So, you would tell your teachers, if you don't like what it says, don't do what it says. You know your students, you know your subjects, take these ideas and make them your own. So I think empower them to use this as a tool, but that they are the ultimate decision makers in their classrooms.
And that's really what's going to build AI fluency for our teachers, is going in and engaging with it and putting their own insight into it, relying on their knowledge, their not their understanding of the community, their understanding of their standards and all of that, and engaging and pushing back against the AI. That's how you build AI literacy and moving toward fluency, which our teachers really need. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you. Okay, well, we are out of time. Happened fast. So hopefully this is a tool that will be helpful to you. And again, after you close this out, it will show up in your chat over here, and you can pin a chat, but you can also pin a gem. And so once it shows up over here, you can pin it, and then you can go back to it, use it. You can share it with anybody you want to. It does allow you to share it as well, and encourage other people to use it. That's why we build things, is we want people to use them. And so we've already kind of skipped through that. And we've already shared. So I kind of got ahead of myself, but just as a recap, grade the thinking, not just the final products. Human judgment needs to be the ultimate learning outcome. And so that means the assessment criteria has to shift. And so traditionally we might have graded grammar, formatting, and length. Instead, now we need to be shifting that focus to grading things like metacognition, weighing evidence, and justification. And so the grading shifts needs the quality of the evidence used to support the decisions, their awareness of limitations and alternative perspectives, the appropriate use of AI as a thinking partner, not a replacement, and then their ownership of their decisions and their consequences. Those are the things that we've got to start evaluating. And this just shows you how to save that gem again. And then we do have, just a reminder here, reclaim the irreplaceable core of human judgment. And remember, the problem is not the tool. The problem is not that awful, evil AI. The problem is that we've got to redesign tasks, because AI is here. And so we have to live in the here and now and plan for the future. And that means we've got to kind of redesign our tasks. So I encourage you to take at least one task you're doing, redesign it, run it through it, engage with the model to make sure that you are putting in your human oversight, and then shift that load back to the students. And then I do want to encourage you to fill in the feedback. We really do read the feedback. It really helps us to plan webinars going forward. And so I'd love for you to give us some feedback on the webinar. And I'm going to hang around for a few minutes, but it is time. So I know people schedule according to the advertised time. So if you must leave, feel free to do so. And we'll drop the link to this feedback form. If you complete it, it will send you a certificate to the email address that you complete it with, so that you can use it also for CEU credit. But we do appreciate the feedback, even if you don't need the CEU credit.